Welcome to the All Access Entertainment Podcast. I am your host, Joseph Bruen, and back with us for part 6 is none other than Mr. Vince Russo himself, JCW in the house. Welcome to the show.
Wow, Joe, 6 parts. That would mean 6 hours, bro. 6 hours with Joseph Bruen and Vince Russo. 6 hours. I think this may be the most I've ever spoken with anybody.
Right. Yeah, I might be right below Coach at this point, right?
Yeah, right. Exactly. Right.
So let's talk about JCW. Thursdays, 7 p.m., right on YouTube at JCW Lunacy. You know, let's kind of do the JCW check-in. You've been there for a little while now, so, you know, where are you at around with things? You know, how do you feel about everything, and where do you see it being in 6 months?
Wow, that's a lot of great questions. First of all, Joe, let me say I kind of accepted the position and got into it as a let's take it one day at a time.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you that was really twofold. There were really 2 reasons for that. Number one, man, every time you're in the wrestling business, like no matter what company it is, it always turns into the wrestling business. And that always turns into politics and all the things I hate. So that was number one. Number 2, like I'm 65 years old now. Haven't been on the road in a while. Didn't know if I could do it. Didn't know how much I could do. So it was really a let's try it and see what happens. Okay. So it's been about 5 months now. I think it's been a little over 5 months. I think I wrote my first show for them like in October. And man, bro, I got to tell you 2 things. Number one, my total enjoyment of working with Violent J. And where that enjoyment comes from is the mind of this guy, bro. He has such a creative and a unique mind when it comes to like developing characters. And I don't think anybody else out there can come up with the characters that he comes up with. It blows me away. So getting to work with him on a creative level, basically the combination is he creates the characters, give them to me, and I'll write for them. I mean, that's basically the sweet spot that we've come to. And I mean, we've got tapings coming up in a couple of weeks, and my God, he just reeled off 5 new characters to me. That's incredible. Number 2, man, bro, I have really formed tight relationships with this locker room. I mean, I walked in and it was really a bunch of indie guys that just weren't used to characters and story. That's not what you do on the indie scene.
Right.
Once I started developing their characters and getting into these stories, bro, they were so thankful because they're like, Vince, you don't understand. We don't get this. When we go out there and work indie wrestling, we don't get this. These guys are so excited to have a story. So now I've got such a connection with the guys and the gals in this locker room that like now it's like, man, bro, how could I ever leave? You know what I mean? That's the point I'm at now. So really, Joe, it's like I think the most important thing for me at my age is just really pace myself. You know, maybe I could do 2 days in a row, not 3 on the road. You know, I really got to pace myself because I'm not 30 years old anymore. I'm not. Man, 6 months from now, bro, I mean, I just want to get a streaming deal because I want these guys to be seen. I know if they're seen, we will have an audience because there's nothing like JCW out there. You know, Joe, it's funny because I'm looking at the build to WrestleMania. And the WWE is using two ingredients. There's two ingredients. It's either a brawl or an in-ring promo. That's it. Across the board. There's not one single story leading up to WrestleMania. And bro, my challenge is that I sit down now and I write JCW. Joe, I swear to you, I'm 5 months in, and my issue is, how am I going to get all these stories in? Yeah. Like that's my issue. Everybody's got a story. Right. So there are so many stories on the show. And that's why I look at the WWE and I'm like, you guys can't come up with one freaking story. Yeah. So that's why the reason I bring that up is because if we had access to a streaming channel and the masses, I just know people would get hooked on this product because nobody's writing wrestling like this anymore.
And for the fans that aren't familiar with JCW, and I don't know why you wouldn't be, you're missing out if you're not, but check out JCW, of course, again, every Thursday, 7 p.m., YouTube, JCW Lunacy. But for the fans that aren't familiar with it, why don't you kind of just tell us a little bit about the roster, what fans can expect, the diversity that you have with the athletes?
It's funny, Joe, because this is the me and Joe don't butt heads. This is a disagreement, okay? Joe really feels like, Vince, you got to bring in the heavy hitters to bring the eyeballs on the product. And that's why, Joe was bringing in a Matt Cardona before he went to the WWE. Nick Nemeth has been working with us a lot. James Storm, Ken Anderson, because Joe believes in that. And I'm like, Joe, they're going to tune in to see the Outbreak, bro. They're going to tune in to see the Brothers of Funstruction. They're going to tune in to see Cocaine. These are characters that Joe has created that are so unique. So that's where the disagreement is. Like, we do have the veterans and the stars that have been around for a long time, but I really think the appeal is in these new characters because, like I said, man, I can't see these characters. We got zombies on the show, and now these zombies are full-blown cocaine addicts. On the next set of TVs, they get into alcohol. They hit up the announcers for their pills. Poor Mark had to give Outbreak his blood pressure medication because that's all he had on him. Nobody else can come up with this stuff. And that's what I think Joe takes it for granted because, with ICP and the history of ICP, bro, they started in 1989. They're still touring. I think he just takes it for granted like that. These are just characters. No, bro, these are characters that nobody else could ever create. But I really do think it's a happy medium and a marriage between the two.
And you talk about WrestleMania, this is the time, this is the season where you see the best of the storylines normally. And I do feel the same way. This year, there's just nothing going into this show. I mean, there's a couple, great things. Orton and Rhodes are doing a good job with the build. But overall, you're not excited about WrestleMania like you normally are. It doesn't feel like WrestleMania to me. And I'm a longtime fan myself. What do you think it is that has changed this year over any other previous year?
Joe, I know exactly what it is. It's the process. It's the process. And here's what I mean by this. And bro, I called this years ago. The more masters they were taking on, the more partners they were taking on, USA Network, Netflix, ESPN, the more content they were creating. Okay. What was going to happen was they were really going to start watering down the product. They were taking the cash, but they were going to start bastardizing the product. And the product was really going to become watered down because now we got to get out Raw. Now we got to get out SmackDown. Now we got the people there. Now we got NXT. Now we got this. Now we got Unreal. Now we got this. There's so much content out there they have to produce on a weekly basis. Now tie that into the creative room that we saw on Unreal.
Yeah.
You can't have this type of content that you've got to churn out on a weekly basis and then have 12 people talking about it. Joe, there's just not enough time in the day. So all of a sudden, bro, what they're faced with is, man, it's Friday at 5:00. We got Raw on Monday and we don't have anything. So what are you going to do, bro? You're going to take that sheet of paper, you're going to fill it in with matches and in-ring promos. That's all you're going to put on their shows. So the problem is, they took on all these partners. They increased the content they have to create, and a room of 12 people is not going to get that done. Joe, the more people involved in the creative process, the more voices you have to hear, the more time that takes. That's why when it was me and Ed Ferrara, it was two guys in a room looking at each other, going through all this, dotting I's, crossing T's. Then we brought it to Vince. That was the format. That's how it was done. The structure for the amount of content they're turning out is so out of line at this point, and that's why you're going to get brawls and in-rings. They don't have time for vignettes, go outside of the building, think through a story arc of 8 weeks. They don't have the time, Joe, to do any of that.
Yeah. I'm surprised that not surprised, I guess, but, Danhausen has done I thought, a phenomenal job so far. He's number one in the merchandise sales. Very entertaining, obviously. We've seen him everywhere, previous to WWE, but I'm surprised that they took somebody on like that, because that's kind of the anti-WWE. They don't usually go with that type of, these days anyway, that type of character. So it is nice to see. It's a little refreshing to see somebody like Danhausen on WWE television.
But here's going to be the problem, Joe, and I am a big fan of Danhausen. I think this guy's brilliant. I think he's smart. I love him, okay? But here's the problem. The work in creating that character was already done.
Yeah.
He did it. He already created this character. So now they're buying or giving a contract to a character that's already developed. Here's going to be the problem, Joe, and we've seen this over and over again. Bro, if we keep going to the back and he's putting curse on curse on curse of different talent week after week after week, and that's all this dude is doing, right, it's going to get old. And here's a perfect example, Joe. I think the first curse was on Dominic Mysterio.
Yeah.
Then Dominic goes out there and loses the title.
Right.
There was no follow-up to that.
Right.
That's the problem. If all of a sudden Dominic is blowing off this curse and then he loses the title, now Dominic's got an issue with this guy. Was this just a fluke? Is there really something to? That's the problem. And now we see they didn't follow that up, and it's just going to be him putting a curse on somebody every week. And, bro, you can only do that for so long before it gets old.
Yeah, I feel like it's definitely right at the cusp now. It's got to turn into, him kind of joining in with somebody, or obviously starting to wrestle, on TV. But something has got to give. The fans are behind him, but that can quickly turn, as you know.
Yeah.
It gets stale.
Sure. That's the thing, man. Even the greatest characters, you've got to give them material. You've got. I use this comparison all the time. Joe. We've seen Robert De Niro in some of the greatest movies of all time, and then we saw him in Rocky and Bullwinkle. Yeah. And Rocky and Bullwinkle sucked. So no matter how good Robert De Niro was, without that material, the Godfather, Casino, Goodfellas, without that material, he's just another actor. Yeah. That's why it's so important that somebody like Danhausen has that material. Bro, they did the same thing with Bray. You had an unbelievable talent, but your creative could not match his talent. So rather than bring him up, little by little, you start bringing him down. That's the issue, man.
And let's pick out one of the matches that were just recently added to WrestleMania. Obafemi, who's obviously very over right now, up-and-coming star, locking it up with Brock Lesnar. Now, a two-part question here. Where do you think it's going to go? How do you think it's going to pan out? And on the other flip side of that, if you had the pen, what would you do with that match?
Well, I'll tell you, the first thing I wouldn't have done was, bro, this is just ass backwards to me. And anybody that watches Lunacy is going to see exactly what I'm talking about. And Joe, I know you are going to know what I'm talking about. Bro, before you get to that big match, it's heat on the heel, heat on the heel, heat on the heel, heat on the heel. That's why you're tuning in. Vince Sr. did this with Bruno Sammartino for decades. After Bruno, he did it with Hulk for decades. Heat on the heel, heat on the heel. Then you've got the payoff. First two times they had the babyface get to Brock. The first two times. And here's what I compare it to. Bro, don't sit there and tell me that if Andre would have gotten to Hulk before WrestleMania 3, there would have been 93,000 people in that building. Baloney. Bro, we still remember ripping the chain off the neck. Hogan never touched Andre till they got to that match. And bro, listen, we hear all the time, Joe, about wrestling evolving, this and that. Bro, that is one foundational rule of professional wrestling that is true to this day. The only way you're going to get baby faces over is by putting heat on the heel. So I would have done it the opposite way around, where Brock is getting heat on him going into WrestleMania. But Joe, let's face it, maybe they're doing it this way because, you know, I'm hearing rumors of Brock not wanting to do a job at WrestleMania. And if that's the case, then what they're probably trying to do is to shine him up before he goes into WrestleMania and loses to Brock. So from the jump, I would have booked this the totally opposite way.
Let's talk about a gentleman who, unfortunately, we recently lost, Kerwin Silfies. We talked about him before, you know, former longtime director for World Wrestling Federation, WWE. You know, any other memories that you could share of Kerwin over the years?
Bro, my biggest memory of Kerwin is we were both huge Giant fans, San Francisco Giant, and we've got the same exact contact for the last 25 years at AT&T Park. You know, Kerwin was a huge Giant fan. I'm a huge Giant fan. Like I said, we've got that same person that we go through. But, you know, here's the thing, bro, that job is such a high pressure job. And I got to tell you, man, both Kerwin and Kevin Dunn, they were as laid back as you possibly could be for a position like that. And bro, I remember I was working there the day Kerwin had a heart attack. I remember that, bro. I was there for that. And I don't know, bro, maybe that tells you how much people like Kerwin and Kevin, they keep it in because they can never show like they're out of control. Because if the director who's directing the show is out of control and in a panic, then everybody else is going to be. Kerwin was the most laid back guy for a job that was just so demanding and so stressful. That was amazing to me because I would have never been able to handle myself the way he did, knowing the pressures of that job.
We lost another, the global production manager recently, Davey Coates. You know, any interactions with him? He was there since the early 90s.
Yeah, him, I did not know, Joe, to be honest with you. I did not know Davey, no.
So WrestleMania season, let's talk about Pete Rose. You know, he was a big part of the celebrity part of things. And how did that come about with Pete and kind of becoming a regular every WrestleMania and going after King?
Bro, this is what I loved. And everybody, guys, if you know anything about Pete Rose, you know what I'm going to say is 1,000% who Pete Rose was. Because, bro, Pete Rose, for the last God knows how many years of his life, I couldn't imagine how many signings Pete Rose did. That's all he did. Like, bro, you know how now, in Vegas, they have the big stars and they have their, what do they call them when somebody's there for 3 or 6 months?
Yeah. I know what you're talking about.
Yeah. Well, he did that at autograph stores in Vegas. Right. He was literally there. Pete Rose was in the store every single day. And that's what this was all about. Because the thing with Pete Rose and Kane was, bro, he would do absolute anything. But the question always was, how much you paying me? That's all he cared about, bro. If the price was right, Pete Rose would do whatever you wanted him to do, bro. And that was freaking awesome, man. That was awesome.
And how did Pete first get involved? Like that first spot that he did for you guys? Do you remember?
Yeah, bro, that's a great question. I do not know. I don't know the history of that first spot, but like I said, man, the spots after that were just always about the payday, man.
And you mentioned before, you weren't really a big fan of being on camera too much early on anyway, with WCW, WWF. You were more of a behind-the-scenes person, but you would go on to become WCW World Heavyweight Champion.
Yes, I was, yeah.
How did that come about? Let's hear all about that whole ordeal there.
Yeah, bro. See, here, Joe, here's where people don't have a clue. Like, bro, when you're writing Nitro and you're writing Thunder and you're writing 12 pay-per-views, that's 116 shows. Joe, one thing about me in my entire career, even, bro, next week I sit down and I start the next writing process for JCW. I sit right at this desk and it's just me. And Joe, when I start writing something or I start thinking of something I've seen before, I don't do it. I've seen, and I'll catch myself, bro, I've seen that a million times. I've seen it a million times. So the only way you open up that creative envelope is when you do things outside of the box. Right. If you've got Bill Goldberg spearing Vince Russo through a cage, and now all of a sudden Vince Russo has the WCW title on him, that opens up the creative envelope. And it's no different than putting the title on Vince McMahon. I mean, it opens up the creative envelope. And now you've got all these avenues available to you that you could have never went down before. And as a writer, especially in wrestling with all the content, that's what you have to look for. Otherwise, all you're going to do, Joe, is keep repeating yourself and repeating yourself and repeating yourself. And I think that's what we get in the WWE now. We've seen it all. You've done it a million times. And that's why I would do things like that. Bro, there are actually people out there that believe, oh, Vince Russo was such a mark that he wanted to put the title on himself. Like, bro, that is so asinine and so freaking ridiculous. As a writer, that's just a tool in the toolbox. It was the same with David Arquette. If David Arquette would have beaten a wrestler, okay, bro, now you got a beef. David Arquette was in a tag match and he beat Eric Bischoff. And he slipped on a banana peel. And anybody that watched the show knows that the following week, David Arquette was like, I don't want this freaking thing. Like, how the hell did this happen? Bro, after I won the title, on the next Thunder, I'm like, I'm relinquishing this title. I got nothing more to prove. The next show I did that. So for people to actually, oh, Vince was such a mark, he put, No, bro, you know nothing about writing these shows. And it takes things like that, Joe, to open up the roads of creativity. Now you can go places you would have never gone to before.
Right. Let's talk about the world's most dangerous man, Ken Shamrock. Do you see him going in the Hall of Fame eventually, first and foremost?
Yeah, Joe, I swear to God, I say this to this day because for my channel, Russo's Brand, every 2 weeks I go back and I look at an old Attitude Era show. Joe, I swear to God, to this day, I never saw a performer, and I'm going back to Bruno. I'm literally going back to 70. I've never seen a performer in the ring more believable than Ken Shamrock. I don't care who he was in there with, what the match was. Bro, this dude was so believable. And I don't think anybody in the history of the business made the transition from MMA over to professional wrestling the way Ken did. And it was always the emotion, bro. The emotion. Everything with Ken you believed was real. Everything. The promos, the in-ring work, you believed the intensity. That's the word I'm looking for. And without a shadow of a doubt, bro. Bro, I say this all the time. The Rock would not have been The Rock without that program with Ken Shamrock. I say that about Stone Cold Steve Austin. Prior to becoming Austin, it was Savio Vega in that role. And Steve would tell you that. Steve would say, I went around the block with Savio, and Savio taught him so much. And it was the same with Shamrock and The Rock. Without that program, man, I don't think Rock comes out of it the same.
And I think Ken Shamrock is somebody that could have gone on to become heavyweight champion. Is there a reason that what was the reason that he left?
Yeah, bro. When you see stuff like that, it's always contractual, man. It's always above my pay grade. There's something going on money-wise, or maybe he wants to have an MMA fight and they don't want. That is always something above my pay grade. No doubt could he have been in that picture, without a shadow of a doubt.
So one of the most shocking moments, arguably, in WrestleMania history, WrestleMania 15, Philadelphia, Big Boss Man hanging from the Hell in the Cell. Any memories from that skit?
Yeah, bro. Again, I don't know if I talked about him on this show before, but Richie Curtis, man, was like our special effects guy, and he was a magician by trade. And how he pulled off the things that he pulled off, bro. I don't know. I never asked. I never wanted to see the magic. But, bro, that's what a lot of people don't understand. You'll always say, yeah, Vince had his greatest success at WWE. And then the reason for that will always be Vince McMahon was the filter. No, bro. The reason I had my greatest success at the WWE was because of guys like Richie Curtis. No matter what I wrote, I knew it would come off like $1 million. No matter what I wrote. When I'm at WCW and TNA, I'm not writing stuff like that because I know they're not capable of doing it. I even remember, man, the DX Invasion. I swear to you, Joe, I was writing that show. And as I'm writing it, for shits and giggles, I write down DX drives a missile launcher to the WCW building. I literally got a call the next day that they had a missile launcher. And I wrote that because I'm like, there's no way. These guys, we're going to have to use something else. When I was at the WWE, because of guys like Richard Curtis, I could write, and you can write an Inferno match. You can write anything. When you went to those other companies, you had your limitations because you just knew. And I get blamed for this all the time, and this wasn't me, but here's a perfect example. I had left TNA. When I went back and I sat with Jeff and Dutch, they had booked that electrified cage match. It was already booked before I got there. Now, this is my first day back. Joe, I swear to you, I'm like, in my mind, I'm like, this company, they don't have the capability to pull this off. They don't have the resources or the money to pull this off. It's going to look like shit. The WWE, I wouldn't have doubted that for a second. Not for a second. And sure enough, they have the match and it sucks. And I'll never forget that because everybody was chanting Fire Russo. And I had absolutely nothing to do with that. And I'm not saying that to pass the heat. What I'm saying is I would have never booked that match because I know we did not have the resources in that company to make that realistic. With Richie Curtis, I would have booked that in a second.
Yeah. Any memories of the man behind the video packages, David Sahadi?
Oh, yeah, David. Even though I'm a little hot at David right now, bro, he said some things in his book. Somebody smartened me up about that were so freaking untrue. And I tried to call David and he has not returned my call. And I don't want to let that cloud how great this dude was. Again, the behind the scenes talent at the WWE were just insanely great. Chris Chambers, unbelievable. David Zahadi, of course, Jim Johnson. I always say this, bro. I may have written the Attitude Era. Without all those guys, there would have never been an Attitude Era. David doing the packages and, Chris Chambers and producing the vignettes and Jim Johnson with the music. Bro, that was all a part of it. When you don't have those pieces, bro, you don't have the Attitude Era. It's that simple.
You brought up the word vignettes. I feel like that's a missing piece to the puzzle. I think vignettes would still work today. What are your thoughts on that?
1,000%, and we do them at JCW. Yeah. We do vignettes at JCW, and here's a perfect example, bro. Danhausen. Why is he like that? You can't expect me to know his backstory. There's got to be a reason why this guy is that way. The example I always use, Joe, is I was in the building when Val Venus debuted. One of the biggest pops I ever heard in my life. Why? Because of his vignettes. We played those vignettes to set the table for like 6 to 8 weeks. And when he came out, he was a star. But I'm going to go back, Joe, to what I said earlier. Time constraints. Yeah. Vignettes take time. You got to go on location. You got to fly people places. They take time. The WWE does not have that time to do vignettes.
Yeah, that's true. Times have certainly changed, and they've gone by the wayside. But it is what it is. Let's talk about WrestleMania going overseas, the Middle East, all the turmoil in the Middle East right now. Do you see them pulling out of that deal for WrestleMania going there?
God, bro, there's just so much money involved, Joe. Like I can't see it unless there's an absolute danger. But there is so much money involved and so much money on the line, man. I can't see them not going there. I just can't.
What types of things would Vince McMahon say during the Monday Night War period? Did he tune into Nitro? Did he kind of keep his eye on things, or did he have people doing that obviously for him, or did he kind of just do his own thing?
Not at all, bro. Did not watch Nitro, did not watch ECW, did not know what was going on in those companies. It was our show. It's like, bro, when you watch, baseball, and now, of course, everybody's going to say, oh, well, the Dodgers. You always hear the players say, or the managers say, we can't worry about what they're doing. All we have control over is what we're doing. And that's what we did. I mean, Vince just concentrated on our show. WWE 24/7 did not have a clue what was happening on Nitro, did not know anything about ECW. It was, we've got to make our show the best it can be.
So if you had to throw a Mount Rushmore together for announcers in the history of professional wrestling, who would those 4 announcers be for you?
That's a great question. I never got that question before with the announcers. Well, definitely JR, without a shadow of a doubt. And there is no JR without Jerry Lawler. I don't know how you separate those two. And then I would have to say, wow. Now, are we talking announcers or commentators? Like, they're two different things. But both.
I guess commentators.
Man, Jesse was phenomenal. But then, like, how do you not put Heenan in there? But I think you can get away with not putting Heenan in there because he was more of a manager. And of course, but maybe you wouldn't expect this coming from me, but I would say Gordon Soley. Without a shadow of a doubt. So it would probably be those 4, even though it's hard not to put Vince McMahon on there. I mean, when Vince was an announcer and a commentator, Vince was incredible, man. So it's hard not to put him on there. But I would say King and Lawler, because they're one. Gordon Soley was the absolute model for anybody getting in the business. And Jesse Ventura just had so much color. I would probably say those 4.
And we know your stance on the Hall of Fame, and we've talked about it before, of course, even a little bit on this show.
I want to hear who your 4 would be first.
For announcers?
No, yeah.
So, oddly enough, Vince McMahon. And a lot of people say that he's the worst announcer of all time.
No.
I find him to be highly entertaining, and he put the show over. He really did. He knew what he was doing. So 100%. Vince is on there. Gorilla Monsoon, with just the catchphrases and just that voice. It really stood out. So definitely Gorilla for me. Jim Ross, you got to have JR.
Yeah.
And that 4th spot for me, I guess I would go with Bobby Heenan.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I want to say this too, bro. Please, I do want to say this. Tony Schiavone's great. I love Tony, man. Tony's been doing it forever.
Right.
So that's, Tony's great, man. Tony's great at what he does, man.
Absolutely. When I hear Tony's voice, it takes you right to Monday Night Wars. I mean, you remember all that. The history of WCW. He's the voice of WCW, without a doubt.
Yeah, no doubt. No doubt about it. Yep.
So a very controversial convention years ago, 2007. You were there. There were probably 100 wrestlers there. Turnbuckle Promotions. It was in New York. It was 2007. It's kind of one of those stories, half the guys didn't get paid or didn't get all of their money. People weren't being picked up at the airport. Do you have any memories of that crazy day in New York back?
Was I definitely there?
You were there because I met you there at that show.
Wow, I don't remember anything about that, bro. I could tell you I got paid, because if I didn't get paid, I'd remember that. But yeah, bro, I don't, man. So that kind of tells you I didn't have any issues.
Yeah.
Because
it wasn't for everybody.
Yeah, no, there's nothing that stands out to me, or else I would have remembered. I don't even remember doing it. Yeah.
Yeah, Billy Graham was there. They had the Wild Samoans. Hall and Nash were there. X-Pac. They had Barry Blaustein. There were a lot of different people involved, but I guess it was a little chaotic, and people still speak about it to this day.
Yeah, interesting.
On the flip side of that, you're making an appearance, a very rare appearance, New England Fan Fest. New England Fan Fest 11, Saturday, May the 2nd.
Yeah, not only that, bro. I'm making an appearance in Memphis this Sunday. I'm going to be in Memphis, bro. And I got to listen, Joe. I don't like doing any of that stuff. I hate leaving home. I really do. But the territory in Memphis, they had a little angle going with JCW. So I knew if I went, I could get some JCW guys a payday, because they would build something around me. But just the idea of wrestling in Memphis, I mean, that was really the sell. I mean, bro, there isn't a bigger Andy Kaufman, Jerry Lawler. Like, my God. Oh, my God. One of the greatest thing that ever happened in wrestling. So yeah, I'm going to be in Memphis, and then I think it's in New Hampshire, right? When is that, in May?
May the 2nd. That's in Seekonk, Massachusetts.
Yes, I'm going to be going up there. And like I said, man, I don't do these things often because I really just hate leaving home. But that promoter was very nice. I always ask who's going to be there. I don't need any drama in my life at this point. I saw the people that were there. Everything was cool. So yeah, I'm going to be going up to that.
Yeah, fans are excited. What do you have to say to the fans of the New England area that are expecting
Yeah, no,
you?
bro, listen, man, I tell people this all the time, man. If you got a problem with me and you got a problem with my book, and there's one person you need to blame, and that's Vince McMahon Sr., because that's what I grew up on, guys. So that's what I watched. That's where I got my love for wrestling. So if you want to blame anybody for Vince Russo, blame Vince Sr. But wrestling in the Northeast, bro, is always going to have a warm spot in my heart for just, what it represented, going all the way back to the WWF. I remember, I remember we used to do Raw in Poughkeepsie. And it was such a great, great, great wrestling town, man. So there's always fond memories there, man.
Yeah, the Mid-Hudson Civic Center.
Yes.
Obviously Poughkeepsie, and that's where all the Piper's Pits would take place. It's a legendary place. Macho Man Randy Savage debuted there. And now the arena itself, the Civic Center, has a Hall of Fame. And they're inducting Randy Savage.
That is awesome. And I don't know why, man. I don't know why when I think of Poughkeepsie, I think of the Rosati sisters, man.
Yes.
The world famous Rosati sisters. I always think of them when I think of Poughkeepsie.
Yeah, the biggest fans for sure.
Yeah.
Jim Johnston, we spoke about him before. You touched on him briefly before, but any interactions over the years with Jim that you remember, just kind of talking to him? And also, what was your favorite theme song over the years?
Well, I got to tell you, bro, like a couple of things. I've had Jim Johnston on my show a couple of times. Jim Johnston, one of the greatest thrills I ever got. He wrote a theme song for my show. Let me see if I can find it for you.
No way.
Yeah. He wrote this thing and would not take a penny. And I'm like, bro, you're Jim Johnston. I'll play a little of it, but this is my theme song. Jim wrote this for me.
Good morning, bro. What's going on, bro? You and me, we're going to start the day right. Because today...
Yeah, he wrote that for me, and I was thrilled. Bro, I don't... Listen, there's no Attitude Era without Jim Johnston soundtrack. It's that simple. I'm not bullshitting it. It's that... Joe, I swear to God, I watch... Whenever I watch wrestling today, because now... Thank God I just watch the highlight reel when the shows are over. That's all I watch. But to this day, I'll hear music and have no idea who it is. I got no idea who's coming down. No idea in the world. With Jim, that first note, first freak, what a freaking genius. And like I said, man, without his soundtrack, there is no Attitude Era. He was on my show a couple of times, and he told me, man, he said, Triple H wanted to get his guy in there. That's how Jim Johnston was released from the WWE. Triple H wanted to get his guy in there. But he's one of those guys, and that's why I feel the way I do about the Hall of Fame. Jim Johnston's not in the Hall of Fame, and you want me to take the Hall of Fame seriously? Come on, bro. Like, oh my God. I was so lucky during that time to work with the people that I did, Joe. Like I said, I talked about Richie Curtis and Jim Johnston, and we talked about David Zahadi and Kevin Dunn and Kerwin. That was the genius of Vince. Yes. He hired the best person for the job and let them do their job. JR in talent relations, just across the board. I remember Bob Collins. I know you remember that name, right? People like that. Cohen, Steve, what was his first name? Ed Cohen. Yeah. These were giants. And that was the brilliance of Vince McMahon hiring those people.
The gong meant so much for The Undertaker, the glass breaking for Stone Cold, and it's all thanks to Jim Johnston for
I
sure.
get it. Yeah, absolutely, man.
Now let's talk about the Hall of Fame. Obviously, we know your stance on the Hall of Fame, but let's look at this year's class, 2026. You got Stephanie McMahon, AJ Styles, Dennis Rodman for the celebrity wing, the Demolition Axe and Smash, Sid Vicious, and Bad News Brown. What are your thoughts on this year's class?
First of all, Dennis Rodman never spent one day in the WWE. I don't know if anybody knows that. He was never associated with the WWE at any time. But I mean, Joe, come on. Is it not obvious that there's a checklist? We need the celebrity. We need the woman. We need the black guy. I mean, like, that's what it is. And listen, man, I do understand being in the Hall of Fame means a lot to a lot of people. So I am 1,000% ecstatic for them. I know it's very, very important to them. But I also know, we got to be honest, some of these names would have never made it to the Hall of Fame if Vince McMahon was still around. Like, Sid would not be in there. Bad News Brown would not be in there. These were not guys that I think Vince enjoyed working with. Like, bro, Sid would not show up if he wanted to play softball. It was that simple, Sid wasn't one of these guys that loved wrestling like a Mark. He wasn't one of those guys. He was like a Kevin Nash guy. They knew we could make a lot of money doing this. Sting wasn't a big wrestling guy. They just knew we could make a lot of money doing this. And, I know, I don't know the nuts and bolts of it, but I know Bad News Brown had some issues, during his day, working for the company. So, a lot of these people would not be getting in, but I'm always going to go back to this, bro. I still believe Ivan Koloff is not in the Hall of Fame.
No, I don't think he is.
And that's my issue right there. Like, how is King Kong Bundy not in the Hall of Fame? How is Ivan Koloff not in the Hall of Fame? We could even say, Miss Elizabeth. How is she not in the Hall of Fame? I know Owen has a little bit of something to do with Martha, so I think that's a little different. I think that's been turned down. But, again, so many deserving people not in there. That's why I just can't take it seriously. I would have always, man, do just like baseball. Put it to a vote to the fans. Let the fans vote on who's going in that Hall of Fame.
I do feel Demolition's overdue, so I am happy to see that.
I agree with that 1,000%. They were great, bro. They actually made an appearance at my video store when I had my video stores out on Long Island. They were great, man. I love that team.
Rick Martel's another one I think we should see.
I agree 1,000%. 1,000%. Yeah.
He had a great career as well. So kind of a two-sided question here. What's missing in the grand scheme of things? What's missing from pro wrestling today, number one? And on the other side of that, back in the Attitude Era, what do you wish from today you had then?
Number one missing is emotion. Without a shadow of a doubt, emotion. Real emotion. Because emotion is what makes people care. If there's no emotion, it's wrestling. Right. And you're only going to get emotion with well-defined characters. Then you start. I always say this all the time, Joe. Can you imagine if Rocky, the movie Rocky, if it was just the last 20 minutes of the movie, if it was just the fight, would we give a shit about Rocky? Would we give a shit about Apollo? We would not care about them at all. It was the whole build to the fight. That's what we're missing today, the build. I'll tell you what the definite 1,000% positives about wrestling business today, and that's we don't have the drug issues that we once did. We don't have the addiction to the painkillers. We know today's wrestlers, bro, they're playing video games in the dressing room, okay? And they're not going out after the show, drinking, getting pilled up, getting addicted. That is far and away the biggest positive about the wrestling business today. Hopefully wrestlers are going to live a lot longer, and we're not going to have these, just these horrible stories we had with guys in their prime, the Scott Halls and the Kurt Hennings and the Savages and the Warriors and all these guys. Hopefully that's not going to be a thing in years to come. So I just think the locker room being a lot cleaner. And bro, I'll be honest with you, Joe, that's probably the most important thing. Yeah. That probably supersedes everything else, that it appears to be a much healthier environment.
So who would you say, looking at JCW, looking at WWE, AEW, even the independents, who is the next breakout star in professional wrestling, in your opinion?
God, I got to tell you, man, I've got a guy at JCW now, and I know he was at TNA, and I'm like, I don't know how they miss on some people. I just don't know how they miss. I've got a guy right now that's like my chosen one at JCW, Caleb Conley. Yeah. And I know he worked. I know he worked at TNA for a while, and I know I've been working with him for 5 months. And I don't. Sometimes I shouldn't say that. I do know. I do know what they miss. Caleb is not political. He's not. He's going to do what he's told, and he's not going to say anything. And that you're not going to get over in wrestling business that way, because you're swimming with sharks. And those sharks are going to eat you alive, and they're going to chew you up and spit you out. And you can't be a nice guy in the wrestling business. Caleb is a nice guy. And it's funny, man, when you see a lot of people on the outside looking in, it's because they're good people. And sooner or later, if you're a good person, that business is just going to weed you out, because you got either one or two choices, Joe. You're either going to change and you're not going to like the person you become, or you're just going to leave. Yeah. Either one of those two things are going to happen. And I just, like I said, man, I'm champion Caleb right now, and I don't know how you miss on somebody like that. I just don't know.
I feel like Chelsea Green is very talented, and I hope that they end up, giving her more than what they're giving her, because she really works her butt off.
Oh, she is so good, man. She gets it. She lights up the screen. Man, another guy like that I'm working with now, and I'm like, I swear to God, bro, Nick Nemeth, I said earlier, is working with us a lot. The guy is so giving that I literally have to say, and bro, look, I'm a JCW guy. And I got to say, no, Nick, you're not doing that, because he wants to give so much. And I'm like, no, that's too much. But that's another guy. You see Nick and you know this is a nice guy. Matt Cardona is a nice guy. Bro, a freaking guy like Matt Morgan. If you're a nice guy, you're going to have a really, really hard time in the wrestling business.
Diamond Dallas Page, DDP, one of the biggest stars of WCW, obviously. He came into the World Wrestling Federation as The Undertaker's wife, her stalker, which was kind of ridiculous. But how would you have brought DDP into the World Wrestling Federation?
God, man, I would have brought him in as DDP. But, Joe, that's a rib. That's a rib. DDP is the kind of guy, bro, and I learned this when I went to WCW. And just so you know, Joe, too, like my oldest son, Will, worked for Paige for years and years and years at DDP Yoga. For years he worked there. Paige is the kind of guy that 24/7 he's thinking about the business, and he's thinking about the character, and he's thinking about the storyline, and he always wants to talk to you about that, and he's going to write it out, and he's going to give you notes. That's how Paige is. My God, look at what he's created with DDP Yoga. I remember when he was writing his first book, DDP Yoga, and him showing it to me. That's how Paige is. That shit ain't going to fly in the WWE. It is not going to fly, because what's happening is Paige is smarter than you. He's giving you better material that you can come up with yourself. And now Paige is a threat to you. And now Paige is making you look stupid. And now we are going to rib Paige to make Paige look stupid. That's how it works. DDP didn't need to come into the WWE with a ridiculous gimmick. Paige was Paige, and he was over huge.
Yeah. And we have a fan question as well here. Outside of pro wrestling, who is Vince Russo, and what are some of your interests?
God, bro, I'm just a guy, man. I'm a homebody, bro. I'm not a people person, man. I don't have a lot of friends. I'm very introverted. I'm a huge baseball fan. I'm a huge fantasy baseball player. I love my English bulldog Penelope. It's a lot simpler than you might think it is.
All right, awesome. And how can fans follow you? Let's hear about it. The podcast that you're involved in, of course, russosbrand.com, JCW. Tell us all about it.
Yeah, guys, well, I've been podcasting now, and we've had our channel for over a decade now, man. Just go to russosbrand.com. Bro, it's $4.95. It's not Jay. I just got an email today from Coach that they're raising the Netflix prices again. Oh, surprise, surprise, surprise. Bro, we've been $4.95 for 10 years. We're never going to be more than that. And we have podcasts every single day. A lot of my friends come on. Now we're doing a lot more JCW stuff. JCW, a new show every Thursday night on YouTube, JCW Lunacy, 7 o'clock Eastern. And Joe, I do want to announce my third book. I just got the cover. My third book will be out July 14th.
Awesome.
It is available now on Amazon. You can pre-order it on Amazon. I planned from the beginning that it was going to be a trilogy. But I got to tell you, man, after the second one, I didn't have a third one in me. Mm-hmm. And I just one day I threw it out to Michael Holmes at ECW Press. I'm like, Michael, what do you think about? And he was like all over it. And man, Joe, I just sat down and started writing and probably wrote the whole book in under a month. And it will be coming out July 14th. Total nonstop agony. And that will be out. Like I said, you can go right now on Amazon and pre-order the book.
Awesome. Looking forward to seeing that for sure. Encourage the fans to pick up a copy. Pre-order it now. That's a big deal. That's awesome. I'm a big fan of books and autobiographies, so I'll be picking one up myself.
Yeah, this is really the story, and nobody's told it. This is really the story of what happened when Bischoff and Hogan showed up. Okay. I mean, that's the bulk of the story.
Yeah. I look forward to it for sure. Yeah. Now, fast forward many years from now, looking back at your career as a whole, what do you want your legacy to be? How do you want to be remembered?
I say this all the time, when I'm asked that, Joe, and I really, 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 really mean this. Wrestling was a job, bro. And the most important thing to me always was providing for my family. So that's how I looked at wrestling, as a job, providing for my family. What is important to me is my legacy with my family. How my kids are going to remember their dad. How my wife, my dad's 95 years old. We talk on the phone every single day. That's the stuff that's really important to me, because that's the stuff that matters. I see, people, so many people in the wrestling business, man. Wrestling is everything to them, everything. And no, man, wrestling is a form of entertainment. That's all it is at the end of the day. So, again, I do take great pride in, like, Joe, whoever I worked for, whenever I went to work, I was the best me I could have been. I couldn't have worked any harder. Every company, every boss, I gave them my all. My work ethic is probably the thing I'm proud of the most. But, being, just how those the closest to me are going to remember me is the most important thing to me.
Well, Vince Russo, thank you so much once again for being here. It's been my pleasure, and a pleasure as always.
Yeah, I look forward to part 7, Joe, because after 5, you said that's it, we're wrapping it up. So I look very forward to part 7, Joe.
Absolutely. For Vince Russo, I'm Joseph Bruen, and this has been the All Access Entertainment Podcast. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave your comments. Love to hear from you, the fans, and we'll see you all next time.